My name is Jeff Moore. I currently live in Austin, Texas. I began my coaching career at my alma mater, the University of Redlands, where I had played for the legendary Jim Verdick, who was a World War II hero, Stanford football star, and coach of 15 national championship tennis teams. Absolutely the best coach in any sport. I'm very biased that I've ever been around, and was the inspiration for me getting into coaching. My first job at the University of Redlands, I was chosen for some crazy reason, I still don't know why, to be the first women's basketball coach. So I had just graduated and I knew pretty much all the players. And one of the women went to the athletic director and said, Pomona and these other schools have teams. It's Title IX. We need a team. And he said, well, go find a coach. And maybe they thought I was somewhat organized. I don't know. I'd never coached anything. So that was my first job. And the second year, I coached women's tennis there. And that's where I really got excited, because we started the year losing to the top team in our section, Cal Poly Pomona 8-1. And we ended up the year winning what was then two divisions, Division I in Southern California, and Division II. We won Division II by beating Cal Poly Pomona 5-4. So just the rate of improvement, I got really excited about it. But coaching was not a career then unless you taught PE. And I didn't really want to do that. So I initially decided to get into my dad's business. He was a head of school at different independent schools around the country, great leader. So, I didn't really know what to do. I'll go teach and coach. Got my applications in too late and got back rejections. My heart wasn't in it. I'm in Denver teaching tennis in the summer. My parents are living there. My dad's the head of the Kent Denver school. And the Colorado job, women's job, comes open. Got the job. And I coached the women's team for 6 years. Had to have a part-time job, had to sell tickets for the Denver Nuggets in the summer, teach lessons, all of that. And then in my 5th year, the men's coach retired. So they said, would you like to coach both teams? And even though I would only have one part-time assistant for both teams, I said, yeah. I just was so inspired by Coach Verdick and so loving being involved in trying to build a competitive team. I would get to do even more of what I love. So the women's team got into the top 20, got an interview at Texas. Somehow I got the job because there were other top 10 coaches that were more experienced who had to have royally blown their interviews. So now I'm in the promised land. I'm at the University of Texas. I've got everything. Really stumbled my first 6 years, recruited nothing but blue chips, just on their ranking. Didn't work. I just wasn't wired for that. I was wired for Coach Verdick. Give me someone who's hungry, talented. And so I'm kind of boat racing through this. So I was close to getting let go because, we were still in the top 20, but at Texas, that's unacceptable. And all the other teams had won multiple national championships. This was a glory time. You think now is good for the University of Texas. Every coach other than me, almost every coach, was the Olympic coach in their sport. So, and I thought to keep up, again, I recruit the highest ranked players, wine and dine them, treat them nice, get the results. I'd lost that zest for competing. Luckily, a light went on during the first team meeting of year number 7. A player raised her hand. I'm up at the board going, this is what we're going to work on, of course. This is what we're going to do. And she says, our practices are boring, something like that. There's not enough variety. And I remember I wasn't really good at thinking on my feet in those moments, but I was ready. And I remember turning around and saying, winning colors everything. And we're not winning on Texas standards right now because we're not practicing winning. And I just felt such a sense of relief. But that night I realized, I said, what's going on here? I just become so absorbed in comparing and results obsessed, not results oriented. So I shifted our training, which I can get into if you want to to be more games approach, more problem solving, like getting them ready to compete, not to hit 100 more balls into the next day. I also started to recruit based on that. Like, do you want to compete? Are you hungry? And don't get me wrong, these players were good, but Stanford didn't want them. Florida didn't want them. They were the powers at the time. No one beat Stanford. And so I started to recruit that way. And through good recruiting and also, let's face it, luck, I got the kind of players that really, really had something to prove, and they poured it into every practice. They didn't wait till the next spring, go, we're going to show Stanford. They put it into practice, all that energy, and ended up winning a national championship, the lowest seeded team at that time to ever win it. I mean, no one below 2 won it. We were 5. And then we won another one a couple of years later. We had some Final Fours, and I still get goosebumps thinking about these kids. Well, the first one that comes to mind is when 1992, Stanford was hosting, and Stanford had won 53 straight home matches and 5 consecutive NCAAs, and we played them in the semis. And they're supposed to just roll to another championship. And we were able to beat them at their place, front of 2,000 people, stunned people. And just to be around those athletes that I had, I mean, they weren't, like they do today, yelling and screaming and pounding their chest. I mean, after a point that they earned, not that the other player hit a stupid error, after they earned, they just give it this and go on to the next point, and just very serious about competing. And what's really cool today, those Stanford players are really good. Many of them are very good friends of my former players. There was tremendous respect. I got cards from the Stanford players. Wow, your team really knows how to compete. And that's so meaningful from both sides. I would advise young people to get into coaching if they are excited, or if they can get excited about helping young athletes transform their lives, make a difference in young people's lives. Like, I wasn't dreaming of becoming coach of the decade or this or that. I just love what I was doing. I poured everything into it. Now, I wanted my team to win, but winning was the commitment to winning was going to be determined by their commitment to competing every day in practice. It's pointless to talk about winning. You can't control it. But what you put into it, you can control. And so I would apply that. I would say coaches should apply that to their own sort of mindset, is don't get ahead of yourself. Well, in 5 years, I want my team to be in the top 10 or whatever. I mean, you can't control that. And thinking too much about those things, and we're all aware of them, can lead you down the wrong path. It's a tremendous honor. And as I said before, just to be part of that group of tremendous athletes and coaches who, and the athletes weren't just talented, they were great competitors, and it gives me goosebumps to be around them. I feel very, very lucky. This little guy from Redlands, the little engine that is actually part of this. I feel very fortunate. You have what you have because of those that came before you. And that's true, but just knowing that and thinking that and saying thank you for your service type of thing is not enough. I mean, to understand the history, because as I mentioned in a couple of stories I told you, things were a lot simpler and they were a lot clearer. And there were things that had to get better. It's not like the grass was greener back then. I mean, I was driving vans for 12 hours with no assistant. That's not safe. There were things that had to get better, but there was also a purity about it. It wasn't perfect. That I think if you go back and study, it's like studying American history. I mean, leadership has never changed. Management has. Technology's changed, but the attributes of a leader, a competitor, have never ever changed in history. And so to go back, and the further you go back, the simpler that is, and the more clear what that is.